I would like to pose a question, and the question goes like this. In sports, have you ever heard of neurodiversity? Me neither. Until now, we're going to learn more and more about it on the Brian Snow Show, and it begins right now. The thing is, until you can erase 3 Februaries, shut up. Bang! Quality over quantity. LeBron has beaten some of the best competition in NBA history. He's the GOAT emoji. I will not cuss. I will not cuss. I will not swear. I will not swear.
Where sports is the base, life and fun are the results. This is the Brian Snow Show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the Brian Snow Show. Glad to have you. And my guest today is a neurodiversity expert. You might be wondering, what the heck is neurodiversity? As I said when I read the profile, and then I got curious, very, very curious, so curious that the neurodiversity expert is here, and we're going to talk about it this afternoon. Please welcome Khushboo Chabria. She joins me right now. Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. All right. Satisfy our curiosity. What is neurodiversity and how'd you get involved in it?
Sure. Well, I was actually working with neurodivergent people already as a clinician beforehand. And I'd worked in that field for 10 years, serving children, working in homes, working in schools, working even with adults. And somewhere along that journey, I actually discovered my own ADHD. And, like any other professional, I actually disclosed that to my manager and hoping to get accommodations in the workplace. And I quickly found out that as soon as they learned about my diagnosis, I was kind of getting managed out of the company. So I struggled with my own employment for many years, and that ended up leading me to becoming an advocate for neurodiversity. And so what neurodiversity is, to give you a basic explanation, it's the natural human variations of brain function and behavior. Meaning, just like biodiversity is the diversity in biology, neurodiversity is the diversity of brains, right? So what being a neurodiversity advocate means for me in my current situation and what I do now is supporting companies, leaders, coaches, other types of people who manage teams to understand how to support neurodiversity in all environments and empower neurodivergent people to be actively included in the team and whatever it is that they're working on. And on the other side, we work with neurodivergent job seekers and neurodivergent professionals to train them on the skills and competencies to basically enter the workforce and find fulfilling careers where they can find supportive people to empower them in those teams.
That is fabulous. That is fabulous because when I read your bio, like I said, I got very, very, very curious.
Yeah.
How does this mix into sports? How does this mix into sports, and how can more advocates come forward to assist?
Absolutely. I also want to say we do have a Neurodiversity for Dummies book you can check out if you want to read more all about neurodiversity for any of the listeners who are listening. But in terms of sports, one of the things that a lot of people have found, whether it's through research, I've found that a lot of sports professionals have ADHD. And we know some really important ones, like Simone Biles is one that has talked about her ADHD a lot. There's also Clay Marzo, who's a surfer, who talks about his autism. There's also people who've done rowing and all kinds of other sports where they have come forward to say that they actually have ADHD or autism or dyslexia. And the thing about these neurodivergent conditions is that they come with strengths and differences, right? So, and
Mm-hmm.
I can speak to this myself as someone with ADHD, I have hyper focus, meaning once I'm clicked into what I'm supposed to do, the level of motivation I bring to my work, the level of perfectionism that I bring to my work, the level of detailed thinking and analyzing and strategizing that I bring to the table because of my ADHD can transform a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there's a lot of athletes that have shared over the years how their neurodiversity has helped shape their life and helped improve their confidence and their self esteem and who they are as individuals. And there's a really interesting thing about sports. There's very clear roles, right? You know exactly which part you're playing in the team. There's clear rules for how the game is played, how the game is scored, how people win or how people lose, right? And there's also really clear, defined, basically responsibilities that you have as a team member, right? So I know when I'm playing this position, this is my aim and this is what I'm trying to do. There's a level of structure and predictability that sports provide that neurodivergent people are very attracted to. And if they are motivated by that sport and they have hyper focus, then they can really excel in that sport beyond what anyone else could have ever imagined. So it's a really interesting thing. And I always go back, by the way, to the example of Forrest Gump.
Mm-hmm.
We remember when he goes to the football
Yep.
field, he's actually not even on the team, but the coach recognizes that when he's told to run
You're
and
right.
he's gonna run across the whole field, he
Mm.
will. And
Yep.
he's getting touchdowns, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really very similar to how a lot of neurodivergent, you know, athletes will kind of, you know, focus in on what it is that they need to do and
Mm-hmm.
really, really, really excel in their careers in whatever sport it is that they choose. But
Fabulous.
the other side to that coin, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to say that, is that there's also differences that come from being neurodivergent,
Okay.
right? So, for example, Clay Marzo, before he became a famous surfer who's autistic, he didn't have any problems. He was doing great at the sports. But usually, after some of his events, you know, the press would come, he would be surrounded by crowds, he'd be getting asked all kinds of questions.
Mm-hmm.
Under that situation, he would get really stressed out. And that's sort of where his autism would show up,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We've seen similar things with other athletes as well, where they might be great in the actual setting of doing the sport and being an athlete and actually engaging in that activity, but all the outside things that come with being an athlete, you know,
Mm-hmm.
maybe traveling, going to all kinds of different airports, having to sleep in a place you haven't slept before, having to eat foods that maybe you're not used to eating. These are all things that can affect someone who's in sports, right? And neurodivergent people may struggle with that because of the differences in their brain, how they think, maybe their sensory sensitivities, and how they kind of experience the world around them.
What are some strategies for addressing some misconceptions about neurodiversity? How do we address that?
Great question. I mean, I think, you know, the best way to reduce misunderstandings is to increase awareness, right? I think every coach, every team lead, every professional, every leader, we all kind of have a duty to make sure that we're inclusive of everyone that's involved,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And the best accommodation that you can give a neurodivergent person is mindset, right? Having the right mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing that a lot of people don't sort of recognize when we break this all down to the basics, right? Neurodiversity is normal. It's normal that we all have differences in how we think and how we communicate, how we perceive information, how we make sense of what's happening around us.
Mm-hmm.
And you need that diversity on a team, especially a sports team, right? Because
Absolutely.
different people are going to have different strategies. Different people are going to bring different strengths to the team.
Mm-hmm.
Different people are going to add different types of value based on their position or what part they play, right?
Right.
So it starts with first recognizing, understanding, and fully accepting that neurodiversity is normal. It's always been there. It's always going to be there. Neurodivergent people are in every sphere of our society. They're in entertainment, they're in media, they're in technology companies, they're in sports companies, right? They're playing
Mm-hmm.
sports, they're athletes, they're actors, they're
Yep.
musicians. So recognizing that neurodiversity is a normal part of human diversity is the beginning part.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is, and these are what we call principles of neuroinclusion, right? The second one is the concept of compassionate curiosity, right?
Yeah.
So if you're a coach, if you're, working with the team and you see something that doesn't make sense about one of the players, one of the team members, instead of jumping to, a judgment
Mm-hmm.
and, jumping to a conclusion about what that person is like or who that person is, we ask people to kind of put that aside. And, we're all walking around with these lenses of expectation and judgment, right? We expect people to talk in a certain way. We expect people to engage in a certain way. But we ask you to take that off and instead put a separate lens of compassion and curiosity. Compassion because you don't know the history of that person.
Right.
You don't know what they've been through. You don't know what their background is. You may not understand, what exactly is going on. And curiosity so that you could ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
And ask like, hey, I noticed, when all the press and all the reporters came to ask you questions, you couldn't answer any of them. Can you tell me what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's something that you as a coach or anyone who's supporting that team can do, is to step in and just be a little curious. I noticed that, the other day when we were waiting to get into our hotel room, you were very upset. Can you talk to me about what's going on? Right.
Yeah.
And if that happens in the future, how can I support you? Right.
Yeah.
Because our goal as coaches and people who are leading people is to make sure that everyone feels understood, everyone feels heard, everyone feels supported and empowered.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, the third principle and the fourth principle are including people for their abilities and accepting them for their differences.
Mm-hmm.
So including people for their abilities, meaning you're really using a strength-based approach when you're working with your team, right? You're looking at who does what best.
Mm-hmm.
What would be the best position for this person? What is this person's skill level? What are opportunities for growth for this person, right? And including people for their abilities also means, recognizing that there are some things that are harder for some people than others.
Right.
Maybe you have a team member who's really great at talking to journalists. Maybe you have another team member who isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you have a team member who does great in crowded places that are loud.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a team member who doesn't, right? Maybe you have a team member who understands all the jokes and laughs
Mm-hmm.
at everything. Maybe you have a team member who doesn't,
Right.
right?
Right.
But if you are being truly inclusive of the people on a team as a coach, the mindset you bring to accept people as they are and to work with their differences can create a lot of psychological safety. And one thing that people don't realize about psychological safety
Mm-hmm.
is that when a team has high psychological safety, it performs better than any team with any other measure.
Right.
Okay?
Right. That I've noticed. That
Right.
that I've noticed. There's one word that you mentioned, and I love that you mentioned this word, and that's resilience.
Mm-hmm.
How about some personal stories from you about when your resilience was tested and you used it to get over the hump?
Absolutely. For me, one of the things that I really struggled with when I started my career is my strong sense of justice.
Mm.
It really got me into trouble.
That, that,
I had a lot of questions. I had a lot of complaints. I had a lot of, why do we do it this way and why don't we do it that way? And I was coming across as a very difficult person in the industry that I used to be in, right?
yep.
And I really, at some point, decided after working in a couple of different jobs and couple of different teams, I realized that I just wasn't in the right industry.
Mm.
And I was maybe not in the best environments that were really working for me. And I consider myself a really persistent and resilient person. I'm also a Capricorn. Um, so, that's kind of part of my nature.
Mm-hmm.
But I really, pushed myself out there to figure out what was possible. I hired a coach for myself. I started all the way at the bottom again. I left a really great career where I was making amazing money. And I started working as a volunteer to work myself back up. I learned everything about the industry. Just a couple of years ago, I was awarded a Global Neurodiversity Evangelist Award. So I was recognized globally for being someone who supports and empowers neurodiversity in the world, which also led us to writing the book on neurodiversity. And I should also announce that this year we're going to be releasing Autism for Dummies so people can learn more about autism as well.
Beautiful.
But I became someone who got a career coach to support myself to transition my career. And I used all those skills and experiences, and I became a career coach for neurodivergent professionals. And I think that changing your career, recognizing where you're not feeling supported, starting over again, it takes a lot of grit. And when I'm focused on something, I'm hyper focused on it. I will learn everything about it. I will answer every question about it. I will look at it from every single angle. And that's kind of how my ADHD is as well. Being able to write a book on neurodiversity became possible because of my resilience to understand neurodiversity, whether it's from a clinical perspective, whether it's from an educational perspective, whether it's from a career professional perspective, as well as looking at how the rest of the world accepts neurodiversity as well. And I think that's one of the things that ironically makes me a good coach, because when my students talk to me about something they want to do, I'm able to look at it from a lot of different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm able to come up with a million ideas that they can run with.
Yeah.
And I'm able to look at it from a lot of angles. So here's what it would look like, if you were on a local team. Here's what it would look like if you were on a state team. Here's what it would look like if you work in HQ, right? Really thinking about all these different angles to things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that one of the things that is a great neurodiversity strength is that resilience. It's that ability to keep going. Simone Biles talks about this a lot, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And just
Yes.
keep going, keep persisting on what it is that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Most neurotypical people, which are people who don't have these diagnoses of autism, ADHD, dyslexia, etc.,
Right.
they will not be the kind of people who will go and practice the same moves, practice the same sports, practice the same techniques over and over again,
Mm-hmm.
like someone with ADHD would.
Yeah.
Because people with ADHD hyper focus on their art, their ability, their skills, their performance. And not only that, but they're also motivated by novelty.
Mm-hmm.
They're really, really motivated by problem solving in the moment. That's where we really come alive.
Mm-hmm.
And because we have the ability to look at something from so many different perspectives and think outside the box, when we're playing and actually engaged in an activity, we're able to think fast,
Mm-hmm.
we're able to make quick decisions, and we're able to impulsively move in a way that's strategic. So it's very interesting, but a lot of professionals in sports
Mhm.
have reported that they have ADHD. And I've read actually a report that in recent years, it's almost 3 times more than there used to be. So that's something interesting to note
Wow.
as well.
Wow. That's crazy. Talk about your book
Yeah,
and how you came to write it and who gave you the idea and everything like that. Talk about your book.
absolutely. I mean, I wish I'd said that I went out looking for the opportunity to write a book, but I believe that when you have, really true commitment to what you do
Mhm.
and you put the intention out that you want to change the world and you want to make the world a more neuro inclusive place, those opportunities present themselves. And I will say that in the year 2022, DEI has kind of been under attack the last few years, but my
Yeah.
career's kind of been up and down, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I actually literally prayed and said, God, if I'm supposed to do this work, create a sustainable path for me because I live in the Bay Area and
Mhm.
I need to make money and I want to do this work. I believe that this is what I was born to change in the world. Okay.
Mhm.
And I kid you not, just a week later, it was Christmas morning, I got an email saying, Hi, we're Wiley. We're writing a For Dummies book.
Mhm.
We want to write a title called Neurodiversity for Dummies. And we would love to talk to you if you're interested in collaborating on this project.
Wow.
And of course, I jumped on it
Oh yeah.
and I pulled my team together. My team includes another person who's actually autistic. His name's John Marble.
Mhm.
And he was the first openly autistic person to work in the White House, which is amazing.
Yes, it is.
And our third team member, who's also another co author, his name is Ranga Jayaraman. And he's been a C-level executive for decades. And he goes into these trainings telling people how he had it all wrong and
Mhm.
how he was not really seeing neurodiversity as something that needed to be included until his son actually got diagnosed with autism.
Ah.
And that changed his entire perspective.
Mhm.
So the three of us together are engaged in our nonprofit, which is Neurodiversity Pathways, part of Goodwill of Silicon Valley. And the three of us are the authors of this book, Neurodiversity for Dummies. And then we just couldn't have enough. We ended up writing a second book as well. We wrote
Love it.
Autism for Dummies right after we finished writing this book.
Love it.
And, we are in this mission because neurodivergent people are, as I mentioned, in every sphere of our society. Neurodiversity cuts across all the other identities that people have: gender, race,
Mhm.
sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, any identity that you can think of, culture, all of them. Neurodiversity cuts across everything. We call it an equal opportunity identity,
Yep.
right? And neurodivergent people are very likely to be in sports. So if anyone listening to this episode today may know that you have someone on your team that's a little bit different, recognizing that all you can do is bring an inclusive mindset, bring understanding, increase your own awareness of neurodiversity. Definitely pick up our book if you're interested to learn
Yes.
more. Everything we know is in the book. And remember that if you have a team where people feel included, where people feel psychologically safe, regardless of what sports we're talking about, right? You can have powerful results. You can have a team that performs better than any other team in the history of the world. But to increase that psychological safety and to improve basically the team dynamics requires you to bring that inclusion and that acceptance for how people think, speak, communicate, and how they make sense of the world around them.
Yeah. Yeah. That is fantastic. How can people connect with you?
Absolutely. People can connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at Kushness. So that's KHUSHNESS. It's a play on words.
Mm-hmm.
And then also you can connect with me on LinkedIn as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn. I often share about events that I'm speaking at, different types of panels I'm doing, as well as things that my team is up to. So you can get all the updates online. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Very, very informative. And now my curiosity is through the roof even more to learn even more about neurodiversity. As I said at the top of the episode, when I heard the term, it was the first time I heard the term.
Mhm.
B, it was a connection to sports for me, being a sports announcer, 30 years active. And C, I just wanted to learn more about it. I learned a lot today from you. And I want to thank you so very, very much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll be with you next time.
Thank you for tuning into The Brian Snow Show, where sports is the base, life and fun are the results.